I know, Sam. I know. But it's in French. I know I went to school in Mississippi. I'll just have to say the words the best I can, okay? It's in French. They didn't have French where I went to school. I'm from Mississippi. Okay. I'll try to mumble through it. Perfect crime, a locked room, and one tiny mistake that turns everything into a nightmare. What follows isn't just bad luck, it's fate tightening the noose. So let's start at the beginning. Hello to all the classic people who are returning. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on the French film noir Elevator to the Gallows 1958. And if all goes as planned, the week that this video is released, I'll be in Paris photographing some locations from this film. More details on that later. This film is rated at 7.9 on imdb.com. On RottenTomatoes.com, the film has a 93% on the tomato meter and 91% audience approval. These astronomical scores attest to the quality of this movie. Yeah, it's that good. Great film critic Roger Ebert gives this film 3.5 stars in a September 15, 2005 review. He says in part, quote, "These 1950s French noirs abandon the formality of traditional crime films, the almost ritualistic obedience to formula, and show crazy stuff happening to people who seem to be making up their lives as they go along." Unquote. Actors. Jean Moreau played the role of unhappy wife Florence Carolla. Moreau, who may be the greatest French actress, was first covered in the great war drama The Train, 1964. Maurice Ronnet was cast as the murderer Julien Travenier. Ronnet was born in France in 1927. He studied at the Paris Conservatory. He made his stage debut at 20. He was a suave French leading man through the 1950s and 60s. He is best known internationally for today's film Elevator to the Gallows 1958, as well as The Fire Within 1963 and Purple Noon 1960. He died in 1983. Story. The movie begins with a close-up of Florence Carolla, Jean Moreau, on the telephone, desperately confessing her love and needing to move forward with Julien Travenier, Maurice Ronnet. Julien professes his love and desire for her. Miles Davis's horns begin their work. Julien is in a high-rise office building. Florence says she will be waiting at the Royal Camille when the deed is done and that Julien should come in his car. She gives details of what will happen when he arrives in 30 minutes. Julien asks Genevieve, Micheline Bona, to remain at work a little longer on this Saturday evening. The company that Julien works for is the Carolla Corporation, and it is owned by Florence's husband, Simon Carolla, Gene Wall. Julien asks that he not be disturbed, thus setting up his alibi. Julien puts on gloves, then takes a business plan, a pistol, and a rope with a grappling hook out onto the balcony. He throws the hook to the next floor and then climbs the rope. He enters a window outside an empty anteroom outside of Simon's office. Julien enters Simon's office and the man starts raging on him right away for keeping him waiting and delaying his planned trip to Geneva. Simon mentions that Julien kept him waiting during the Indochina Wars. The Indochina Wars were a series of conflicts between the French colonizers versus the future Vietnam and other countries in the region. The wars lasted from 1945 to 1954 and ended with a French defeat. Julien gives a plan to Simon, who is quite taken with the covert findings. After calling Julien a true friend, he mentions that Julien is a war hero and a paratrooper. This plan pertains to Algeria, a colony that France would lose about 4 years after this film was made. Julien pulls the pistol he has on Simon. The older man doesn't take the threat seriously. Julien continues that Simon has been a war profiteer from the Indochina Wars and now from the trouble in Algeria. Simon's tune changes when he realizes Julien is holding Simon's gun. The murder of Simon is not shown as they cut away to Genevieve sharpening pencils. Julien places the pistol in Simon's hand to make it look like a suicide. As he picks up the plan, he sees a black cat walking on the railing outside the office. At least it wasn't a CGI rat. Julien locks the room from the inside and uses a knife to lock the main lock. This seems like a common mystery trope featuring a murder in a locked room. Of course, this time it is to make it seem like a suicide. The security guard Maurice talks to Genevieve about Julien causing him to have to work late. Although she is instructed not to disturb him, Genevieve calls Julian. There is no answer. Julian uses a rope to climb back down to his office where the phone is ringing at. He answers it and says he will soon be out. Julian, Genevieve, and Maurice ride down in the elevator. Outside, Julian walks towards where his car is parked. There is a young couple, flower shop girl Veronica and teen tough guy Louis, who are having a disagreement. Veronica knows Julian and is quite taken by him. She tells Louis that Julian fought in the Indochina Wars before serving as a legionary in North Africa. He also has a convertible. Julian starts his car and lowers the roof. Suddenly he sees the rope and grappling hook hanging from the balcony. He runs towards the building. Louis sees the running car and knows that this is his opportunity to be a rebel without a cause in his new leather jacket. Julian heads up the elevator, but before he can get to the floor, Maurice turns the power off for the weekend. Maurice then secures the exterior grating at the entranceway. Louis prepares to steal the car, even though he doesn't drive that well. Veronica chews him out, but she jumps in for the ride. As they get going, Louis raises the roof of the car as it is starting to rain. Florence is sitting outside at the Royal Camille. Did you know that the chairs in Parisian outdoor cafes generally face outward for optimal people watching? She sees Julian's car go by with Veronica as the passenger and thinks Julian has run away with the flower shop girl. She sits back down without any idea what to do. She is pestered by a man who had sold her a car earlier. Florence thinks that Julian lost his nerve for the murder and ran off with the young girl. Veronica and Louis head for the highway in the stolen car. Veronica finds a miniature camera and a pistol in the glove compartment, thus setting the stage for their Bonnie and Clyde style rampage. Julian is trapped in the elevator and none of his efforts lead to his release. Once night has fallen and it is still raining, Florence heads onto the street, walking without much purpose. Julian's futile efforts to free himself are shown. He hears Florence rattling on the gates outside the door. A small girl that should not be out so late asks Florence what she is doing. Florence tells her to go home. The little girl finds the grappling hook and rope and takes it with her. Had it fallen on its own? Meaning Julian didn't really need to go back? Florence asked a gas station attendant and later a bartender if they had seen Julian. They haven't, and her funk overwhelms her. This is a beautiful walking and jazz music scene. She snaps back for a second after seeing a car that looks like Julian's. Veronica is tired of riding up and down the highway with no destination in mind as the rain continues. They are overtaken by a fast German Mercedes 300 SL driven by an older German couple. Louis gives chase. The Mercedes takes an exit and Louis follows until they arrive at a motel. Louis bumps the Mercedes, but the driver, Horst Benneker, Ivan Petrovich, invites the young couple for a drink with him and his wife, Frederica Benneker, Elga Anderson, thinking they are newlyweds. Veronica really wants to stay in a motel, never having done so before. Louis begrudgingly allows her to register under Mr. and Mrs. Julian Travenier. The young couple is placed in a cabin next to the Germans. Horst shows Louis the engine of the car, and room service brings food in a tuk-tuk cart. They drink a lot, and Louis acts like he fought in the Indochina Wars. Veronica shows Frederica the miniature camera, and 3 shots are left on the roll. She takes pictures of the other 3 people in the room. When Louis sees her, he snatches the camera. It is mentioned that the motel has a film processing lab. The party continues with the men smoking cigars. Julian is shown in the elevator, and the debris from his many escape attempts is scattered around. Looking even more beaten down, Florence is accosted by a man on the street. The man confuses her bedraggled look for that of a working lady, a mistake the police will later make as well. Horst tells Louis that his name is not Travenier and he has never been a soldier. But the German couple still want to be friends. The 2 couples each return to their cabin. Everyone is happy except Louis. Florence is soaked by the rain as she continues to look and ask for Julian. Julian finds a trap door under the carpet in the elevator. He drops some lit paper and sees it as a very long way down. After a moment, he climbs down using a hanging cable. Outside, another security guard unlocks the grate before checking the inside of the building. The security guard drops his keys, so he turns on the power. Julian is sent rapidly downward, but he is not crushed. He makes it back inside the elevator as the security guard turns the power back off. Florence enters an arcade cafe and wanders around. She asks about Julian, but the manager has not seen him. She begins to think that she should have committed the murder herself. A drunken friend of Julian's from Algeria arrives and begins to drink with Florence. A woman says she saw Julian, giving Florence hope, but that is dashed when the woman says it was a week earlier. Louis wakes up and he wants to flee the motel. Outside, he takes Veronica to the other garage because he is stealing the Mercedes. Veronica goes along. Louis grinds the gears, unable to find First in the sports car. It's true, they hide the gears on German cars. Horst comes outside laughing, thinking the entire situation is comical. Horst points an unlit cigar and tells Louis to put his hands up. Thinking it's a real gun, Louis pulls his gun and shoots Horst. Frida runs into the garage and Louis shoots her as well. How many times have I told you? When you hear gunfire, run the opposite way. Veronica and Louis leave in the Mercedes. Louis makes it back to the city and they abandon the car on a bridge before heading to Veronica's apartment. It's a cold water walk-up, the kind of dump you can't find anymore. Louis falls into self-pity. They are convinced they are going to jail. Veronica says they will only be together in the newspaper headlines. She is romanticizing their plight and it evokes Romeo and Juliet. Veronica puts on some music and they both take an overdose of a barbiturate. They lay in bed and wait for their fate. Florence is next seen in a paddy wagon with a herd of, I think this is the right term, filles de roi. They are unloaded and taken into the police precinct. Julian's drunk friend is brought in as well. The cop is shocked when she tells what her husband's name is. Another cop verifies her story and everything changes. She has them call for her car. While Florence is waiting to be picked up, the homicide detective commissioner comes down to question her. He asks her if she knows Julian. She says she knows him vaguely. When asked when the last time was she saw Julian, she tells him that she saw him the previous evening with another woman in the car. Of course, we know she is mistaken, having only seen Veronica and Louis. The commissioner tells her that Julian killed 2 German tourists. The police have found Julian's car at the motel, plus his coat and gun inside the abandoned Mercedes. Only Veronica was seen at the motel check-in, so they assume Julian was with the young woman. Florence's sighting tends to confirm their suspicions. Florence is driven back to her house where she can pick up her car. At the motel, the police text, carefully collect information. The deputy prosecutor, Hébert Deschamps, is running the investigation. He intimidates a couple of witnesses into saying that they saw Julian, except that they did not. The deputy prosecutor releases information to the newspaper that the killer is Julian. Security guard Maurice and 2 policemen arrive at the Corolla building to search Julian's office. When Maurice turns the power on, Julian is released from his elevator prison. However, the police and Maurice ride up in the other elevator and don't see Julian. Maurice discovers Simon's body and lets the police know. On the street, Julian thinks the police towed his missing car. He goes to a small cafe and calls for Florence, but is told she is asleep. The people in the cafe, some of whom know Julian, are looking at him oddly as his picture is already in the newspaper and has identified him as a murderer. Finally, Julian sees his picture in the newspaper as police with blaring sirens close in. In the police station, Julian is given the 3rd degree. They know when he left the building, and they think they know when he drove away with a young female. They also have his coat and gun from the Mercedes. Finally, he tells the commissioner about being trapped in the elevator all night. The police dismiss this as ridiculous. He is told that Florence is the one who identified him in the car. He says he barely knows her. The commissioner thinks this information is credible because they both say they don't know each other well, and it has confirmed the stories as he believes it to be. At the office, Florence is told of her husband's death and the future struggle she will have taking control of the business by her business advisor. She finally has time to read the newspaper story. She vows to herself that she will save Julian. Florence goes to the flower shop and obtains Veronica's address from the manager. She drives to the apartment and finds Veronica asleep in the bed. A groggy Louis enters from the bathroom. She tells the 2 Utes that the drugs they took are not fatal. She says they stole Julian's car and killed the 2 Germans. Florence yells that they need to tell the truth and free Julian. She then locks him in the room. Louis thinks he has been given a reprieve since the police are looking at Julian for the murders. This lasts until Veronica reminds him about the photos from the camera at the motel. Veronica has a spare key to open the door and sends Louis out to the motel to retrieve the film. It is not clear when they would have dropped the film off for processing. Florence calls the location of Veronica and Louis into the police, who are not very receptive. She sees Louis leave on a moped. Florence follows him to the motel. Louis walks into the photo printing laboratory and is met by the commissioner. They have 3 photographs of Louis with the German couple while they were still alive. Louis is taken into custody. Florence comes into the laboratory, and the other pictures on the roll are all of her and Julian. She is told and realizes that she will do more time for the murder of Simon than Julian will. Echoing something said earlier by Veronica, Florence says her and Julian will only be together in these photos. Conclusion: Jeanne Moreau is amazing in this film, even though she mostly walks around pouting. As hard as it is to believe, this was the first feature film for director Louis Malle. He was around 25 years old when he made this film. He went on to make 3 more films with Jeanne Moreau: The Lovers, 1958, The Fire Within, 1963, and Viva Maria, 1965. Legendary trumpeter Miles Davis watched a screening of the film and recorded the music in a single session. He then brought in a quartet of musicians and improvised each tune in the film. It is alleged that this was done while drinking champagne with Jeanne Moreau and Louis Malle. Director Malle shot iconic French film star Jeanne Moreau in close-ups with no makeup and with only natural lighting during her night walk down Champs-Élysées. He used very fast film and mounted the camera on a baby carriage. It has been reported that processing lab technicians were appalled at how unflatteringly she was photographed and objected to the star being shown like this, but eventually agreed to process the film as requested. Once they saw the results, it soon became clear that Malle had captured every subtlety of Moreau's performance. World famous short summary: never leave photos lying around. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you want more, be sure to subscribe, hit the like, and ring the bell. Beware the Moors.